Now let's actually warp some audio files and play around with some warped audio and see what it does. Now the cool thing about warping is that in most situations when you're working with loops and samples from your sample libraries, you don't even have to do anything. Ableton Live just does it automatically for us. So for example, I grabbed a drum loop earlier. I'm going to grab another one right now. Let's drag and drop this in. And it just detects it as, hey, this is a 2-bar loop, and it's going to play it perfectly in time. Um, Now, real quick, a good way to check whether or not an audio file is properly warped is, well, first off, again, double click on the clip, open it up in the clip view, and you can see that warp is turned on down here. This warp function is turned on. That means that it is warping it. And loop is turned on. That means that it's going to continue to loop this clip. If I were to go up here in the arrangement view and extend the right edge of it out, it's just going to keep continuing to loop it over and over and over again. But anyway, what I was going to say is it's an easy way to check if it's warped correctly is to turn the metronome on up here. This metronome is meant to tick along it perfectly in time with whatever our project tempo is right here. So if I just mute this track for a second and I hit play, we're just hearing this metronome play along once every quarter note beat at an exact tempo of 123 BPM. If I turn that up from here, it's going to go faster. If I turn the BPM or the tempo down, it's going to obviously go a bit slower, right? So when something is warped properly, it should play perfectly in time with that metronome. And if we take a listen to this drum loop now, sure enough, yeah, that played perfectly in time for those 2 bars. So like I said, a lot of loops, samples from sample libraries, things like that, Ableton's going to automatically loop it and do a really good job and detect that right away. Where we start to run into issues and where we have to start doing a little bit more work is when we're dealing with longer audio files. So what I'm going to do next is bring a full song in. So let me jump down here to the good old iTunes music library. And what the heck, let's do Nirvana's Smells Like Teen Spirit. I was listening to that song earlier. Let's drag it in. Um, so let's take a listen to it. Now, I've dragged it in, and if you remember in my preferences, the auto warp long samples is turned off, right? So when I dragged it in, we look at the clip view down here, we can see that this warp function is turned off. Ableton's doing what I told it to do. Let's see what happens though if I just turn the warp button on, and we'll play it along with Ableton Live's metronome. So remember, that's going to tick along at 123 BPM. I don't know if this song is originally recorded at 123 BPM. I don't think it is. I think it might be close, but I don't think it's exactly that. But let's take a listen and see if Ableton Live detected it and what it did. Not quite. So there are a couple things going on here. First off, let me stop that playback for a second. First off, if I go down here to the clip view, remember our zoom commands. I'm going to use my mouse just to zoom here though. I'm going to zoom in on the 1 where Ableton Live set the 1 on this clip view grid. We can see that that's off from where the song actually starts. The song actually starts right around here and there's a little bit of empty space. You're going to notice this on pretty much every mastered song. If you download songs from Beatport that you're DJing with or whatever, you're going to see a little bit of space at the beginning of every song. So Ableton Live doesn't realize that that's not part of the song. So it's when it aligned the grid to the audio file here, it was like, oh yeah, the 1 must be right at the very beginning of the audio file, right? But that's wrong. So that's one thing that's going on. The other thing is that the grid, even if we did line that 1 up to the beginning of the song, which we could do very easily by right clicking here, you see these little markers. These are called transient markers. When we bring an audio file in, Live kind of scans the audio file and it detects all these peaks in the waveforms. The peaks are called transients. We can go to this first one here and we can right click on it and say set 1.1.1 here, and we can tell Ableton, hey, that's the beginning of the song. Let's actually see how it sounds. It still sounds off though, right? So the reason for that is because Ableton Live thinks that this song was recorded at 123 BPM, but it actually wasn't. So the grid that it's lined up along the background of the clip here is 123 BPM, and our song is not actually that, so things are still a little bit off. So what we have to do next, after we found the beginning of the song, and now bear in mind that the beginning of the song might not always be the first downbeat of the song. And by downbeat, I mean the beginning of the first bar or the first measure of the song. In this song, it does happen to be, this song starts right on a downbeat, but some songs might have a little bit, maybe like a vocal reverse or like a white noise intro or something, some ambient sound, and then the drums kick in, and then we can start counting the beat in our heads. So you'll want to listen out for that in whatever song that you're warping. This one I know starts right on a downbeat. So again, we right clicked on the transient marker and we did set 1.1.1 here. It created this little yellow square. This is called a warp marker. And the warp markers are cool. We can actually create warp markers anywhere we want to in the audio file. And when you have a warp marker, it's kind of like sticking a pin in the audio file, and we can move it around and stretch it. So you can see here, if I just do some really wacky warping stuff right now, I've taken this segment, which was originally, I'm just going to hit Command Z a couple times to go back to where it was. I've taken this segment, which was originally way back here somewhere, right? Let's listen to the bar 2 here. Turn off the metronome. Right? So let's redo that way over there. Let's just go here. That's fine. So we got this segment, which was actually, you know, somewhere over here. Listen to this. So it's just really stretched out that part of the audio file. So we can use warp markers creatively to kind of play around with stretching the audio and messing around with it and changing the rhythmic feel of it. But for right now, let's delete these warp markers. I can delete warp markers just by double clicking on them or clicking on them and pressing the delete key. But for right now, let's try to get this thing warped so it's playing properly and in time with our tempo. So what we can do is after setting the 1, we can right click again on that first warp marker and we can choose one of these auto warp directions here. So we got warp from here, start at 123 BPM, warp from here straight, and warp 123 BPM from here. These are the only 4 we're going to focus on. So these are directions that we can give live to go through and scan this audio file and automatically warp it for us. But each of these is going to work better in different contexts. So these first 2 options here, warp from here and warp from here, start at 123 BPM. Now this number, 123 BPM, this is reflecting my current project tempo up here. So it's worth noting that it helps if you set your project tempo at least close to whatever the original song's tempo was. So if you don't know exactly what it is, at least set it close. I probably wouldn't want to have this at like 200 BPM and try to warp it from there because Ableton likes to take the project tempo into account and it's going to really mess up the warping. So you don't have to have this number exact, but at least set it closely. So we have warp from here, start at 123 BPM. These first 2 options, these are really good for live recorded audio. So like a rock song like this, for example, jazz, funk, soul, music that has a live drummer that was involved in the recording process. These first 2 options are really good. The second option is good if we know the tempo. If I downloaded a song from the internet and I know the exact tempo of it because it set it on Beatport or on Apple Music or whatever, I know that tempo, I can tell Ableton, hey, I know the tempo, so warp from that tempo. But remember, you'll have to change your project tempo up here first to set it to that correct tempo. If you don't know the tempo, you can use just this warp from here option, and it does a pretty good job trying to detect it and line up all the audio along the grid for us. These next 2 options, warp from here straight and warp 123 BPM from here, these are best for electronic music, house, techno, dubstep, drum and bass, trap, stuff like that, right? Music that's produced electronically on a computer, or the drums are sequenced on a drum machine and maybe they're quantized to a grid. Things that are produced electronically, these 2 options are going to work really well for. And again, this option here where it gives us the tempo, this is good if we know the exact tempo of the song. Maybe I downloaded a house track off of Beatport and I need to warp it for a live set I'm doing, and Beatport tells me it was 125 BPM. I can change my tempo up here to 125 BPM, and then I can right click on that warp marker that I set the 1 on and say, hey, warp 125 BPM from here, right? But if I don't know the exact tempo, again, I can set my tempo at least close, and then I can right click and just say warp from here straight, and it will go through and just basically set a straight grid along the whole audio file, assuming that it's an electronically produced song and that it's going to line up more or less along that grid. So for this song, Nirvana, it's an early 90s rock song, right? Let's try just warp from here because I don't know the exact tempo. And let's see what it does. So it's going to analyze the sample. It's going to kind of automatically apply warp markers if needed and then line the grid up or line the audio file up along the grid as best as it can. So let's take a listen to this with the metronome on, and we'll see how it sounds. So you can see here, it detected the original tempo. This BPM box, this is Ableton's guess as to what it thinks the original tempo of the song is from one warp marker to the next. So from segment to segment. So it thinks it's about almost 110 BPM, but we're playing it at 123 BPM. So it sounds faster, but it does sound like it's on time. If we listen along to the metronome, it sounds like it's perfectly locked in. I always like to, before I just say, yeah, this is good to go, it's all warped and sounds like it's locked into the tempo, I always like to kind of skip around the song a little bit. Maybe we'll check somewhere in the middle. Maybe we'll check somewhere at the end. Yeah, and it sounds like it's locking in pretty well. If you notice it's a little off, you're like, it's close, but something sounds a little bit off to my ear, you can always zoom in. What I normally like to do is zoom in somewhere near the end of the song, and just take a quick little look and see, like 137, where it detected the transient and placed the warp marker. That looks like it's lined up right on that beat there, so we should be good. But yeah, this song should be good to go now. So I'm going to go through this process one more time, but I'm going to do it with a house track. So make things just a little bit easier for us. So I'm going to mute Nirvana for a second. Let's go into my iTunes Music. Let's grab just one of my songs. Where am I? And we're going to grab this. Where's Staycation? I like that one. Yeah. And we'll go to just the original mix. Should be fine. I'm going to drag it in. So same thing here. We got that little bit of space. Whoops, I don't want to adjust the start marker. We got that little bit of space at the beginning, right before the actual song starts. So let's turn warp on. Ableton Live didn't catch that. Tisk, tisk. Let me close my browser for a minute here. So let's take a listen to it. Starts with a kick drum right at the beginning. I know that's the first downbeat of the song, so I'm going to tell Ableton Live to set 1.1.1 there. And then I'm going to direct the auto warping using one of these auto warp directions here. Let's just do warp from here straight because it's an electronic song. I don't remember the exact tempo of it. It's 120 something. So it's going to analyze. It's going to set additional warp markers if needed, though. With the straight grid, it usually just leaves one warp marker at the very beginning and then just kind of aligns the grid perfectly straight along the audio file. So let's take a listen to that with our metronome on. Sounds pretty good there. Let's skip to the middle of the song. Sounds good there. And let's check the end of the song. Still sounds good at the end. Cool. So once you've warped a long audio file like this, if you save this project, all the warp settings are going to save inside the project. But let's say I'm going to use this song when I DJ a month from now or something, and I maybe want to change my set. I want to use a different project, but I don't want to have to warp this all over again. You can click this little save button here, and it'll save the all the warp markers and the way that it aligned the grid. It'll save all these warp settings to what's called an ASD file, and that's going to save in the exact same location as wherever the audio file is on my computer. So if I right click on this, I can go to Show in Finder. This is just where my sample is in the Finder, and then we can see here that there's my song Staycation, and here's this .wave.asd file. That's the analysis file that Ableton created that contains all these warp settings and all this warp information. So if I just bring this song in, this audio file into any future Ableton Live project, it'll remember these warp settings and keep them here for me. So let's just do one last thing before we wrap up. We got to do a little mashup because these are both perfectly warped. Let's play them together. Let's make sure things aren't too loud. And this is some of the fun that we can now have with warping. When we have audio files that are properly warped, we can change the tempo now to whatever we want. And because they're both locked to the grid, they're going to play perfectly in time. Slow it down.